Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to talk about Dear Evan Hansen.
Big shelf.
So look, let's get a whole bunch of stuff out of the way here. Every musical requires a certain degree of suspension of disbelief. I mean, it's just inevitably sort of a weird thing when people burst into song. Some of my favorite films are actually essentially not musicals per se, but operettas, where they're basically singing the entire time. So you never have those moments where you actually have lines of dialogue that sort of step you away, that you're in the middle of a dramatic moment and then suddenly either the strings swell or something happens and the actual music happens. But we have like over a century of productions, films, etc., that sort of employ this. So it's a very particular shtick that I grant a lot of people are uncomfortable with on the big screen. It's so weird. They're totally happy when it actually happens in something like an episodic television that does a musical episode, where suddenly they burst into song and it becomes sort of like a concert. But when it comes to straight up movies, a lot of people still are sort of like weirdly itchy about it. So let's just put that out of the way. Then you have the casting. I mean, you have Ben Platt here, who originated the role on stage. And he's what, late 20s or something like that. He's playing a high school student. I mean, as has been pointed out numerous times, just look at the guys in Greece. And I certainly didn't have a problem in terms of the age nonsense when, you know, the people who 10 years earlier did Rent, and suddenly there's supposed to be these sort of whip-snap kids living in squalor and making on. They all look 50. Point of the matter is that grant all of those elements, you sort of forgive it all. But it seemed like there's a particular hate on for Dear Evan Hansen before it sort of even the trailer hit. When the trailer hit, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, why is this like 90-year-old guy playing a high school student again?" Just immediately close to anything that this film was going to go with. I went in as skeptical as ever. I've certainly been burned before by musicals that open the Toronto International Film Festival. Um, uh, but I wanted to give the film a shot on its own terms. I'd not heard of the music before. I knew it was Tony Award winning. I knew roughly some of the sort of story beats. A bunch of those were sort of re-emphasized with the trailer that I got inadvertently before another movie. But nonetheless, I went in, you know, hoping for the best, but fearing for the worst. And I gotta say, it's extremely well put together musical as a musical. The actual musical writing is pretty phenomenal. Like Alex Lacamoire is one of the film's producers, and for those not aware of his role, not only as this essentially the pit pianist for like numerous productions, but he's really the guy who helps translate the likes of Lin-Manuel's songwriting into musical craft, into making it work. If anybody saw the Hamilton at the White House when Lin-Manuel sort of gave a tease and people were laughing at it, the guy just pounding on that piano was Alex Lacamoire, just an incredible musician. So the way that they did the orchestrations, the way that the songs actually evolved, the way that they use repetition in ways that are in keeping with the character, but still using the songs and the song's narrative to not be one to one. There's no, yes, there's I Want songs, yes, there's those sort of like trademark elements of the musical, but it's done in a way which is this wonderful mix between what's sort of diegetically important and narratively important, but also telling slightly more broader inclinations and character movements. So I really think that those elements are extremely strong. And then you have some amazing supporting actors. Amy Adams is fantastic, but I love Julianne Moore in this movie. Because it's got to be a thankless role, but when she finally gets her moment to actually sing, it should be maudlin, it should be cheesy, it should be this like, you know, absolutely, you know, going for the rafters moment in terms of the broad emotionality. But she just nailed it. She's just really goddamn good at what she does. And Amy Adams too. A role of a mother of a different kind, somebody whose own um, losses, her own, frankly, challenges mentally, are expressed in ways that are sympathetic but never free from judgment. It's not as if any of these people are angels, including the lead character, who in very many ways is sociopathic. You can make claims to why it happened. You see all the bad choices that take place, and I can see people sort of blindly empathizing with him and just forgiving it all because, oh, he has mental health challenges. Therefore, he's got a quote unquote excuse for everything that he's doing. I think the opposite is true. It's really showing that while we can account for so much of this stuff, sometimes so much of what's actually taking place here is a combination between the struggles that many of us share and all of us in some ways have to navigate, and just sometimes people are just kind of terrible. And at best, we can attempt to make up for it and not be completely scot-free from it. I understand that by the time it's done, there are many people that are going to want really this kind of a vengeful response to sort of what took place, the lies that are told. I think that's sort of beside the point here. We really get a sense of not only the struggles that are taking place and the different back and forths as they actually play out narratively, but just that, sometimes people are just terrible, and you can understand that people will be drawn to that. You understand fundamentally that people are going to be wanting to make themselves better by doing something that they think is right, whatever the truth of that right thing is. And certainly we're seeing that a lot all over the world, with the proliferation of these kind of people falling for this stuff. And refusing in some ways to let go, and just turning on people when they find that something that maybe they shouldn't have fallen for so hard in the first place, maybe they shouldn't have found outside of themselves something to completely brand themselves on, in terms of, we're going to be a good person and we're going to fix everything here, and if we just do this, when things actually cascade and the anger comes out and the vitriol and all of this stuff that they've been fooled, it just becomes another cycle of this kind of lunacy, frankly. We've seen it multiple times with people, when memoirs are found to be faked, when all these elements is like, I can't believe you lied to me, I can't believe you did this, as opposed to more self-reflection of like, well, maybe I shouldn't have invested so much in someone else's pain, in order to better my own position or to feel a direct correlation between what they've gone through and what I've gone through. So at its best, this is a narrative that navigates all of that stuff. I think superficially, I totally get that people will be super frustrated, but I think that the film, the musical, the story, the book, at least delves with the complexity of being a moody, drugged, psychotropically drugged kid who's, has a great deal of support but still has to navigate stuff. The family who employs the mechanisms of their privilege and their wealth in order to better the life of somebody that they feel is a conduit to a life of their son that they frankly never really knew. And just the dynamic about how you do stupid things when you're in high school, self-destructive things that are just there to sometimes just get you through the day and just make things right. And maybe you reflect upon really negatively once you mature, but at the time it just, everything feels life or death. It's as simple as that. And so at its best, I think that the film actually touches upon this stuff, and I think Broadway audiences in the bigger, sort of more heightened stage presence would respond very differently than they will on a film which feels much more intimate. Now, again, back to the lead character, I thought he did a terrific job. He absolutely inhabits the role. His quirks, his twitchiness, his physicality, and all that stuff never feels like it's making fun of something. And again, when you can feel how the desire to please everybody all the time, to not step on any toes, to simply go along for what is expected with you, is suffocating, but completely understandable in the moment. And so there was never a time where I thought that it was so broad a jump, such a big narrative leap that I just didn't buy that any of the stuff that was taking place actually happened. And in the scope of a musical of this kind of subject matter, I actually think it's kind of remarkable. So yeah, not my favorite film of all time, not even my favorite musical of the last little while, but going in pretty trepidatious about how the actual execution was going to go, whether it would just become this sort of really dreary or overly maudlin or overly manipulative sort of emotional train wreck. I was really pleasantly surprised about how they navigated it all with a literary sensitivity, frankly, with paying attention to the various characters, which use it with using really light comic relief from some of the secondary characters. Nobody became goofy. Everybody was sort of believable in so far that it went. And when you actually see the sort of rampage of social media as it plays out, again, entirely believable, entirely in keeping with what takes place. So what should be this incredibly broad, this could never happen story actually has echoes of deeper truths that I think are quite important. Given given these myriad roles, given the impact of the songs, I didn't go out of it like humming anything. It's not that kind of musical, but I appreciate fantastically the craft of many of these songs to actually make you feel certain things. And again, it was really Julianne Moore's performance in a song that should be, as I said, just straight up. I can't believe I'm having to sit through this. I found myself moved, in part because of performance, in part because of impeccable songwriting. It's as simple as that. So there's so much to admire here. You're going to hear so much negativity about this film. You're going to hear so many people wanting to shed on it, to take the agenda. I think that if you switched a couple elements of these characters, about who the character is, the central character, if you, for lack of a better word, checked off a couple other boxes, then suddenly people would be saying, oh, you're not empathizing with the person enough, or you're not actually seeing this person. I think that's just fatuous. I think that the film deals with the very issues of who is this kid who's allowed the opportunity to be this miserable and manipulative, who yes has a very rough things that go, but has a certain level of support and a certain level of status whereby he almost has the opportunity, the mental space to be this broken. And so I believe that absolutely is part of the general storyline and is touched upon. And it's not simply a matter of that you're watching somebody who is struggling and we're sort of blocking off about why are they struggling when there's other struggles for us to actually worry about. Dear Evan Hansen does really interesting things. I think it has great performances. I think the songs are really strong and structured in a way that absolutely speaks to the narrative it's telling. It's a little bit long. It's always a little bit long. I thought it's shot in a pretty sort of straightforward way. There isn't anything particularly showy. And yet I felt the chemistry and the connection between all these characters absolutely fulfilled its need. I think it's a solid B plus film, and about as good as you were ever going to get something out of this. A little bit of showy editing and like editing on the beat, but even the production, even the way the band was recorded, I thought was extremely well done. There was never a moment where the lyrics weren't coherent and comprehensive, but they were. But it was not like they were so mixed so loudly that they were that you're drawing out the instrumentation. You actually heard the instrumentation, and I gotta say, most of the leads are singing straight to camera. There's a couple scenes where there's a bunch of dance sequences and stuff like that, or like sort of flashbacky stuff, where it's clear that they're lip syncing, but the vast majority of this is absolutely sung on stage. And that gives such an intimacy, that gives such a more powerful connection between performance and song and just on-stage behavior that it's truly engaging. I think a lot of people won't necessarily notice it. I mean, and which is the best possible thing. But when you have that, when you know that what's being done there is that kind of performance, that the emotionality just absolutely comes through, and it's really makes for a wild ride. And then finally, yes, it's based on a stage musical, and yes, you have a performer that like was playing in the back of the rafters all the time. He did a fantastic job of being small when he needed to be. Um, Moments where you could see on his face the struggles, stuff that never would have translated on stage, that absolutely would have had to have been much bigger and much broader, are really dialed down. And so, again, something I was very worried about is that it would become super stagey. But I thought, again, that thanks to, I mean, some magnificent performers that we're well aware of, but yeah, when you have a lead character that developed this character, developed this individual on stage, to see that translated in a film and make the adjustment, make the shift, I think is absolutely laudable. So there we are, Dear Evan Hansen. A solid film, one well worth watching, one that, if it doesn't work for you, fine. I think you're going to see, as I said, a lot of anger that I think is misplaced. But I think that fans of the musical will find something here. People who know nothing about the musical or even don't even like musicals very much, I think if they're open to it, they're actually going to find an experience that is quite engaging. It's as simple as that. Thanks so much for watching. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. We have so much more coverage coming from the Toronto International Film Festival and for many other films during the year. Please follow us, subscribe, follow us on social media. Check out the incredible stuff that the rest of my colleagues at That Shelf are doing, and we will see you next video. Thanks so much for watching. All the best.